Liverpool now, founder of the Anfield Wrap, Gareth Roberts. Good morning, Gareth.
Good morning.
And thanks a million for joining us. How are you getting on?
Yeah, not bad. Yourselves?
Good. I'm interested, first of all, before we get into the Liverpool stuff, it's the topic of the week. What are your thoughts on what's going on up the road with Newcastle?
Yeah, we discussed this on the Anfield Wrap podcast this week, and one of the things that sort of I've found a little bit disturbing, distressing is just sort of how people are reacting towards fellow football fans, really. I mean, look, awareness of what's going on in Saudi Arabia and has gone on in Saudi Arabia will now no doubt go up, and people will be looking into it, and I'm looking into it myself a lot more now because, look, it's on the table and it's in front of us, and there is a club in our league now owned by the Saudi Arabia state, despite what they say and what the Premier League say. I mean, anyone can see that this public fund is actually the state. It is actually the Saudi government. And once you start looking into their actions, obviously they are incredibly grim around human rights, around LGBT rights, or lack of, around the repression of women, around war crimes in Yemen, all of the rest of it. And to allow someone like that through the door and to own a football club in England would seemingly, they just wave through. And the only sort of thing that seemed to be stopping them at one point was piracy of Premier League coverage. I mean, it's a little bit of a joke. And what I was saying was I found depressing, distressing, etc. is not only that, but the way football fans are turning on each other and saying, okay, well, how dare Newcastle fans be happy that Mike Ashley is gone? How dare they be happy about that the club might now show some ambition? And the reason I'm saying this is not everyone out there is an expert in foreign affairs, me included. I mean, I got a lot of stick for saying, why are people turning on fans? Because they said, well, do you not know what's going on in Saudi? And I said, well, I know there's human rights issues. And I literally had a thread of tweets coming after me from one particular man saying, well, what about Yemen? What about Yemen? So I've looked into Yemen now, and what's gone on in Yemen's grim, but I didn't know before, and I can't talk about something I didn't know. So my thing here is that the anger should be directed at the Premier League, because the Premier League have allowed this through, and yet again we're talking about the fit and proper test for owners that they've got or lack of. But even when you dig into that, there is a rule sat there that would allow them to have stopped this deal, and they've waved it through nevertheless. And obviously the way that they're doing it is to say in this public board is different to the state when it's not. There is a rule there that says if in the reasonable opinion of the board, she, potential owner, is engaged in conduct outside of the UK that would constitute an offence if such conduct had taken place in the UK, whether or not such conduct resulted in a conviction, then they can decide not to approve the deal. So when people are saying about what's gone on in Saudi and what continues to go on there, and whether these people should be allowed anywhere near a football club, that should be a conversation aimed at the Premier League, not aimed at Newcastle fans. Because I just think, to say to a football fan who supported their club all their lives, okay, then walk away now, that isn't fair. And that, there will be people that are growing up where football is their lives, that football is their only way out, football is the bright part of a grim week, and they'll be living, there are people who save up all week to go to football matches, and there will be people who are not studying what is going on in Saudi Arabia. So all they will see is the headlines. They will see the money, they will see Mike Ashley gone, and they will think this is better times ahead for my club. And I don't think that should be held against football fans. As I say, the conversation should be about this test, the Premier League, and tightening that test up and doing something about letting people like this into England to run football clubs.
Could we just tease that point out? Because I do agree that it's very easy for fans of other clubs, and sometimes it just comes down to basic rivalry that it's easy to have a pop. So I do totally take that point. But at the same time, the manifestation of the sports washing bit is the Newcastle fans cheering and parading about and like doing the things that you would do. And look, a part of it is to do with Mike Ashley is gone. So I think we have to accept that and sort of compartmentalise that almost in the conversation. But the other bit is the bit that, you have the Fenway Sports Group, or you have some other legitimate business interest getting involved in the club, like that very public manifestation of we suddenly get lots of money and the club is owned by somebody else and there's a future ahead, versus where the money is coming from. I do certainly have a sympathy for the discussion about the fans' celebration in this instance being that very public face of sports washing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, even that term. I mean, you know what it means. I know what it means, and you know, and it is depressing once you start digging into it and seeing what's being done, because all of the stuff that I mentioned, that Saudi Arabia have been doing, and the way they run their country, you know, this is a cynical attempt to make people talk about something else in relation to Saudi Arabia. So talk about a successful football team, talk about, you know, bankrolling, signings and managers and everything else. And look, you know, for me to go particularly deep on this, I've found it another little chunk of another depressing factor about modern football, if you like. I mean, maybe it's the age I'm at, maybe it's some of the things I'm living through myself currently, but you know, a little bit of me is dying all the time around football, and this is another part of it, dying. You know, Liverpool themselves, you know, once upon a time, you know, Shinawatra was linked with a move for Liverpool. We had the Dubai group linked with Liverpool. Obviously, there's the owners of Manchester City, there's the owners of Paris Saint-Germain, there's the fact that there's a World Cup in Qatar. And we just go on and on and on, and it just sort of, it feels to me that an awful lot of the time these days is spent not actually talking about football. And, you know, my lad is 13 and he's into football, but not the way I was when I was 13. So when I was 13, I was going the match on the regular. I would be out in the streets playing football. My son came to me and said, "Oh, Newcastle are the richest club in the world. Newcastle have got all this money." And I said, "Is that what your mates talk about with you? Like you're all talking about the money, are you?" And he said, "Yeah." And I just thought, well, I used to talk about something I seen John Barnes do on the pitch. I used to talk about goals and moments in football matches, and I just feel like sometimes the way football is, the way football news is, the fact that there's something like this to talk about seemingly week after week at times, you know, the actual football gets lost. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to sort of Saturday 12:30 Liverpool playing Watford and being able to watch men run around with a ball on a bit of green grass and it matter for a moment, because it constantly feels like there are these huge issues that shouldn't be anything to do with football really, but become about football because, as I say, people like these are allowed through the gate in this country and are allowed to manage a football team.
With the obvious exception of technology and FIFA, for example, Gareth, is there anything else that you've seen as a reason for that, as a reason why the behaviours of young football fans have changed? Or is it all to do with FIFA and the sort of fetishisation of money and how many players you can buy for your ultimate team, etc., that has created this sort of relationship that your boy would have with football now, for example?
Yeah, FIFA undoubtedly plays a part of it, and you know, he plays FIFA and he plays that with his friends, plays that with me. But I mean, there's it's so big, that conversation. You know, it's access to tickets, it's the way football is all over the television, seemingly 24/7 these days. There's a saturation of it in terms of football in media, basically. So I think, you know, when I was growing up, yes, there was football on the television, but nowhere near compared to what we get now. Like you could feasibly sit down every day of the week pretty much now, couldn't you, and watch a football match. Then, you know, you got match of the day. I heard you talking about that on a different piece there. You got match of the day. You got the big match, I think, on ITV. Obviously, going back a long way. I'm an old man. I'm 45 now. But I just think with there being so much football on the television, there's maybe not as much incentive to actually go to a match. There's maybe not as much incentive to fall in love with that aspect of the game, and see, that's certainly what's happened with my son. Like he doesn't have the concentration to watch a whole football match. He'll watch bits of a match. He appreciates skill. He'll watch sort of compilations of players and things like that. He loves all that aspect of it. He loves superstars, but he doesn't love the team aspect. He doesn't love the go in the game, everything that comes around the game, the culture of the game, all of the things that I love. He's not really been bitten by that as yet, and maybe that will change. But I always remember there's a local football team not far from where I grew up, called Prescott Gables, a non-league side. And I remember they did a bit of a campaign of trying to encourage people to just come through the gate and watch some football in person. And they did a thing, I don't think they were alone in doing this, I think they probably got it from somewhere else, but they did a campaign that said, don't let your children grow up thinking football's a television programme. And I thought that was a good point because, you know, even non-league as well, you know, actually going to a game, seeing the tackles first and seeing the, you know, the players having a moan at the referee, hearing what other people are saying around you, the sights, the smells, all of those things are totally different to just sitting down on the couch and watching football on TV. It's a different experience, but it feels to me that maybe for some generation, for some people growing up, that is becoming a bit of an issue. I mean, I've noticed as well locally recently that some of the non-league sides around Liverpool as well are getting really good attendances lately, like much better than, you know, some years back. And again, I wonder why that is. Like, is this Premier League roller coaster becoming, you know, a bit too much for some people? Are they like, well, I'd rather go and watch some real football in quotation marks? And I do wonder why those numbers are going up. It's a good thing. I've always supported non-league football myself, but I just wonder, you know, why significantly are those numbers going up for certain clubs? I mean, Marine, for instance, had a big FA Cup run and obviously played Tottenham Hotspur last season, so that will have put them on people's radars. But they're getting, you know, 1,000 plus virtually every game, and they're playing Wrexham this weekend in the FA Cup, and so they'll get another bumper crowd there, and that's brilliant to see. But some of the other local sides as well are getting good numbers, and again, I just wonder, is that because people are like, I've had enough of the Premier League here. It's too predictable, there's too many issues, it's too much about money, whatever it may be. I do hear other people saying that, you know, in many ways, in little ways, they're starting to fall out of love a little bit with it.
Yeah, you've opened a discussion that we're going to come back to, and we will talk football in a second, but just quickly before we do that, I presume at some point over the last couple of weeks your mind has wandered into, what if this was to happen to Liverpool, what would I do? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, you mentioned before how we all sort of look at it from a tribal aspect, and, you know, I'd do the thing where I'd say, well, I'd like to think that we would X, so that is what I've been doing. But equally, I don't know. I don't know if that would be the case.
What's X?
So X is, you know, oppose it. X is complain about it. X is protest about it. X is we don't want these people running our football club. X is complain to the Premier League about their joke of a test. All of those things. But I think back to when Hicks and Gillette were in situ at Liverpool, and I was one of the people that went out and protested, you know, went on the marches, even started a fanzine pretty much around protest, because I didn't feel the message was out there enough about what they were doing to our club at the time. And we were in the minority, the people who protested. There was plenty of people that just went the match regardless. When I remember giving out flyers outside Anfield and people telling me that I'd been reading too much on the internet and I should just go to the match. So there are people, I think, who support every football club who will turn a blind eye to what the football club does no matter what. Like, all they want is a winning football team, regardless of what that means. And I think a portion of fans like that exist at every single football club that's out there.
Yeah, that's definitely one we need to come back to. Existential crises notwithstanding, although maybe this is one for Liverpool. The Jurgen Klopp situation, he's back on the record saying 2024 is sort of his out time. You've got the Michael Edwards situation going on in the background. His time might come up an awful lot sooner than that. And then you have the Mo Salah situation that still isn't resolved. Do the former two, as in the Klopp and Edwards situation, mean that the owners just get Salah locked off and done because it's too important not to at this stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would have Mo Salah done, you know, yesterday, last week, last year, last month, whatever you want, because he's a brilliant player. He's one of the best to have played for Liverpool, in the top 10 now for goal scorers, absolute legend. And I just don't see a plan where you let him go and how that makes sense. All of the stuff I see for not signing him up doesn't make any sense at all to me. So, you know, questions about his age. Well, look at his resilience. Look how often he plays for Liverpool. Look how many goals he scores. If anything, you know, he's currently in form, back in the sort of form he was in 2018. So, you know, it's not dipping. He's not getting worse. He's just scored a world-class goal against Manchester City. And if he wants more money, as everyone is saying he does, than the rest of the squad, if they have to break the wage structure, then do it, because who else are you getting realistically that can come in and have the impact of Mo Salah? Because Mo Salah is in Liverpool, settled in Liverpool, knows the system, his teammates know him, Liverpool play to his strengths, and that's why he scores so many goals. If you bring anyone else in, whoever that might be, even the big names who are out there, they will need time to settle, and they might not settle. And Mo is settled. And one thing that I think is a good thing about it is that he hasn't been staring himself for anything. Obviously, we've seen bits and bobs from his agents. I'm not too sure about him generally as a fella currently. But Mo Salah, has not been complaining. Mo Salah has been, talking about how much the fans motivate him. We've seen in his celebrations how much he's enjoying himself. He's scoring goals. And so he seems happy, but how long will he be happy while this situation's allowed to drag on? So they should get it done, absolutely, they should get it done. And you're right to say that there are a couple of sneaking narratives out there around Liverpool, or around the future, or around what happens next. And they just need to get Mo done, because Mo would be a positive story. Mo would wipe away some of this residual negativity that's around Liverpool. And there shouldn't be residual negativity, by the way. I mean, Liverpool are unbeaten in the last 17 Premier League games. They're unbeaten in all comps this season in 10 games. And yet there is still this, and you're right to bring it up, there's little niggles there about, I'm not sure about the owners and why they didn't spend in the last window. I'm not sure why they haven't tied Mo down. Why is Michael Edwards going? What are we going to do post-Klopp? There are all of those conversations, but we should all be, as Liverpool fans, much more positive than a lot of people are currently, because Liverpool are flying. Liverpool are points off top, flying in the group in Europe, through to the next round in the League Cup, all of the things that you want, scoring goals, looking good, players in form, a couple of injuries, okay, that happens. But yeah, I just think they do need to get Mo done, because it would be such a boost for everyone, and it would sort of wipe away some of those questions.